Now it's your turn. You can grill our guests. And joining me again are Bob, who runs the Wacky Warning Label contest, and trial lawyer Albert Stark, and trial lawyer critic Stephen Hantler. So who's first?
Yes, my question's for Mr. Stark. Don't you think that there's an element, for example, with the ladders, where consumers should bear personal responsibility for any products that they decide to buy?
Yes, I believe that consumers definitely have a responsibility to use common sense, to use a product that is not inherently dangerous to the point where no matter how they behave, the product is going to cause an injury.
No matter how they behave, ladders were that bad?
Ladders at one point were so dangerous because people thought that they could just use them by climbing, and they did not know that if they reached out, given the design of the ladder back in the 1960s and the 1970s, that the ladder was going to fall over because there were no braces on the bottom parts of the rails.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Hagler, if you limit punitive damages, how do you prevent people that have been hurt of no fault of their own, like the people in Alaska of the Exxon Valdez or the people in the Gulf Coast because of BP, from getting more money than just, say, their wage?
Well, let me state that anyone who's injured, whether it's a personal injury or environmental exposure, I'm all for, and I know Bob Dorigo Jones is, and we are at the Foundation for Fair Civil Justice, in favor of that person getting full, fair, and timely compensation. Punitive damages, though, go way beyond fair compensation. They can range in the hundreds of millions of dollars. I mean, there are cases where somebody, might break a leg or injure their back and admittedly require surgery, but they're getting $50 million, $25 million. We've seen them in the auto industry. And frankly, we've got to have some reasonable limits. We treat our criminal defendants better than we do our corporate defendants. Criminal sentences when they commit a crime. Corporations, in many cases, have no idea what the maximum liability is going to be because
they've got lots of money. They can afford it.
I'm glad you raised that, John, because just as corporations don't pay tax, we pay the tax. Corporations don't pay the high cost of the lawsuit abuse. That gets passed on to every product and service every one of us buy. That's the $2,000 a year annual tort tax. So I think it's a myth when the plaintiff's lawyers say they make products safer and corporations have the money. We're the ones. The trial lawyers are coming into our pockets, taking 40 and 50% of recoveries, where their clients are getting less than 50 cents on the dollar.
You want to answer that?
Steve, the tax wouldn't be so high if corporations were responsible and didn't play hide and seek. I can give you case after case where during discovery after the lawsuit, we have found that the company and the corporation knew of the danger, did not correct it by redesign, did not have proper labeling, and as a result of that, jurors have punished them. They do not like corporations playing games with the consumer, and hide and seek is one of the most dangerous.
Can I respond, John?
Sure.
I'm like any other member of the studio audience. I'm not an engineer. I'm not a chemist, a physicist, a metallurgist. I wouldn't want any of you, any more than I'd want myself, deciding how vehicles should be designed. What Albert's advocating is we allow plaintiffs to sue, the jury comes back with a verdict. If it's against the manufacturer, the part must be defective. Well, what if 12 other juries find that same product perfectly safe? Do we throw out the careful deliberations of the thousands of hours of engineers' time at the government and at the companies because one jury out of 13 awarded an eye-popping verdict? I think that's ridiculous, and it's unsafe for all of us, at any speed.
Albert.
Steve, the Ford Pinto case. Ford knew where the gas tank was. The jury punished them.
Blew up.
Because it was a bad design, and what did they give them? They gave them the profits that...
Steve, what's your answer to that?
My answer is that we need corporations and any small business or large business, and I agree with Albert, to act responsibly. But when you have no clue what a damage award can be, if it could be $50,000 to $250 million...
You support caps of some kind.
I support fair and reasonable caps as long as the injured party gets full and fair compensation.
Yes, ma'am.
I have a question for you, John. Here you are, you're criticizing lawyers, yet you yourself have benefited from a lawsuit when, you told us how you were beaten up by a wrestler and you sued the World Wrestling Foundation and you walked away with $250,000. So what do you have to say about that?
Thank you.
Well, it's true. I was beaten up by a pro wrestler, and I sued the WWF. Oh, yes, great. Here we have it again. I stupidly got up, and he hit me another time. Look, I'm not saying we should have none of these lawsuits. I thought I should teach them that they can't go having reporters beaten up. So I filed a suit. But my experience was it was a sleazy enterprise. My lawyer wasn't interested in justice or what really happened or who was at fault. It was just about the money and trickery and discovery in court. And yes, I made some money, and if a pro wrestler beats you up, I would encourage you to sue too. I'm saying we should limit the number of cases. I knew I had a good case. Who's next? Any other questions that someone would... why don't you pass the mic to this? Doesn't count unless you... Over there you go.
Very simple. How about the idea of loser pays?
Well, that's a good idea. Loser pays. So well, actually, let me stop you there.